or putting something in the chat.
Hi, Ben. Just so you know, I'm expecting some calls in and out throughout this, so I may be getting on and off and on throughout it.
Sure. Thanks for letting us know. All right, so it's 2 now, so I think it's safe for us to start, and we'll let people drift in to our group if they'd like, and also feel free to, if something comes up, to drift out and come back in. We realize that things like this happen, especially being IT people. So by way of introduction, thank you for coming to the Best Practices for Virtual Offices group. My name is Ben Chan, and I'll be presenting for 5 minutes before handing off to Pavita. I work for the Center for Family Representation. We are a nonprofit that's based in New York City. We have about 110 employees right now, and we're spread over 2 boroughs, Manhattan and Queens. We provide legal and social work services to parents in family court. And I've been at CFR since 2007. I started there as a paralegal, and I'm currently their IT manager for the Queens office. We have another IT manager that just got promoted to IT director in the Manhattan office. I'm actually working remotely now from Keene, New Hampshire, because my wife and I moved here last month to be closer to her job. She's a professor at Antioch University. So everybody else is, or most people at CFR are working in New York, and I'm supporting them along with the other IT director from, I'm working from New Hampshire. One of the things that I wanted to talk about for my part of the presentation is something that I ended up getting off the ground and launching during the pandemic. It was an intranet for our office. It's not something that we had before 2020, and it was something that I wanted to do since I've wanted to do it for about 3 or 4 years now. And every time I brought it up with the managers and with the executive director, it was something that they were lukewarm about, something that they saw the benefits in, but also something that they felt would be time consuming for us, meaning the IT department, meaning me and my colleague Gordon, and time and effort that was better spent doing other things. And so it really wasn't until the pandemic happened and our office is shut down and we all started working remotely that I saw my opening and said, you know, we really need an internet right now, just because people are logging in and using the VPN in order to get to information that, and there's information that's not client information, that's not confidential, that they could probably access over using an intranet. And so I built one out. And I'm gonna share my screen and show you, just give you a little tour of what I built out for CFR. So you should all be seeing my screen now. It's on the announcements page. If you don't, just let me know. And during, you know, since there are so few of us, feel free to unmute yourself and ask me questions specifically. So before I started building this out, actually, I started building this out before I actually got permission to. It's like one of those things. If you are familiar with who Robert Moses was and what he did, one of his tactics was that he would start building one of his like public works projects, like a bridge or a highway, and then he'd go to the city and ask them for the rest of the money. So that's kind of what I did with the internet. I started mapping things out and building something before actually going to management and saying, so, I have this idea, and by the way, I actually have some mock-ups if you want to take a look and see how it is. So that's one way to kind of get a project off the ground that you really think that your organization should be doing. If you're having trouble getting some buy-in, sometimes you just kind of have to start building it. Not all of it, just sketching it out, and then come to the presentation and say to people, well, I did a mock-up and here it is. And I think once people start seeing something, especially if it's something physical and tangible, then it's easier to sell them on the idea. And in terms of the prep work, I actually had to talk to different stakeholders within the organization, so the different departments, because I intended this to be a place where different departments could park different information. So for instance, people within the organization, this is probably the most visited part of our internet, is the HR info and forums, because this is where people go to find out information about their own benefits and to find forms about how to enroll in things, how to change enrollments, and do all kinds of things. And people have been asking for a place in a while. And while we have a place on the file server for that, it's kind of become a little bit unorganized, just because in the HR folder, you have parts of it that are restricted because it has all this employee information that should be confidential. And you have stuff that's outward facing for our employees at CFR, so like the forms like this. So having an intranet makes it so much easier for them to separate the forms out and the information that staff need to access, and then also to have another place that's not on the internet where people can access, where HR can keep the confidential employee information. So I reached out to them specifically, and we had a long conversation about what should be here, what shouldn't be here. And it's a continuing partnership. And that's kind of, that's another key to building something like this, is just to know who to talk to within the organization. So and to keep the conversations going, because this isn't static, this is changing all the time. The forms get updated every year. New forms get put up. So the most recent form that we put up has to do with PPE distribution, which is happening through HR. So they put together a Google form, a survey for people to fill out, and I put it up here on the internet. And other things about the internet. Actually, before I get to that, one of the other helpful things that I found out is that when we were talking about the internet, the scope, so what goes up here and what doesn't. So I sat down and I kind of thought things out myself and created a flowchart for my organization, which is titled, "So you think you have something to post on the internet?" I just created all these scenarios, and so because of our limited resources, the most important being that I'm the only person right now that's maintaining and updating the internet. My colleague is the backup, but there's still only two of us. We don't have a team of people that's constantly updating information. We want to be really limited in the amount of information that we put up here, because if we put up too much information, then things become hard to find, things get out of date, and the internet is no longer useful. It's just a copy of our file server. So in order to address that, whoops. Let me get this flow chart. So I made this flow chart about, and the gist of the flow chart is that if it's information that's going to change in less than 24 hours, it shouldn't be on the internet, because people are probably going to see the information in their email, and it's going to expire soon. If it's only information that's relevant to a small group of staff, it probably doesn't belong on the internet, because we only want information that will be useful for almost everybody or a large group of staff. For example, if there's information that is useful to like all of Manhattan, all of our Manhattan staff, then yeah, we should put it up there. If it's information that's going to be useful to our Queens staff, then yes, it belongs up there. If does your information contain a lot of attachments and summaries, that's kind of a gray area. So that probably should be emailed if there's a lot of attachments, but we also have a place on the internet where we can post announcements. And so that's just the flowchart that we're using in our organization in terms of deciding what goes up and what doesn't go up. I just want to show you another part. So the announcements. So one of the things that comes up here in announcements is that, so what I do with announcements is actually just take the body of the emails and I put them in Google Docs, and then I link everything into, and I post a link to the announcements page on the internet. And I find that that's the easiest thing to do, just because we're trying to avoid having long walls of text. So instead of putting the announcements themselves up and having people scroll through them, I find that having the links up on, so that people can click through whatever they want to see and ignore what they don't, is the easiest thing. And then we have this sidebar with the different pages on the internet. And we've also, so in our organization, we used to send emails. Staff had to send emails every time somebody was going to be out, like unexpectedly. So if they were taking a personal day, I'm going to be out today, here's who to contact. And so one of the more useful things that we've invented is this personal out Google Calendar. And so it's a calendar, it's a Google Calendar that doesn't actually, that's outside of the internet, but I can link to it because we use Google Sites because we're a Google Apps organization. And so instead of having like a deluge of emails every day about who's out and who to contact, we've streamlined the process now so people can just go to this calendar, see who's out, and see who should be contacted in their stead. And that's something that's been very useful. And I'd also want to say, before wrapping up, probably the part of the internet that I've been updating the most frequently is CFR recently became a union organization. So we're going through a collective bargaining process right now. So I did create a page for collective bargaining. And all of the collective bargaining stuff lives in Google Drive as Google Docs. But what I did is created one document that has the original proposal for the collective bargaining agreement and all the counter proposals, and that is because there's a lot of negotiation going on. So I try to create a way where people can click to see different sections and what's the most recent, and I also color coded it. So and I think that now that it's created and launched, I think there were a lot of people that were lukewarm, that were like, okay, if Ben's gonna do this, he can, maybe it will be useful, maybe it won't. But now that collective bargaining is happening and this is a way for staff to all see like what's happening, what's the latest proposal, I think there's been a lot more buy-in and people have seen the usefulness of it. With that, I'm going to hand this off to Pavita.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everybody. So my name is Pavita Krishnaswamy, and I am the Director of Litigation at Brooklyn Legal Services, which, as folks know, probably is part of Legal Services NYC. We are the largest civil legal services provider, exclusively civil legal services provider here in the 5 boroughs. And I work out of the Brooklyn office. I've been with Brooklyn Legal Services basically since the day I graduated from law school, which is now, oh Lord, is it only 2020? So 19 years, something like that. Started as a staff attorney in the HIV unit and moved into litigation exclusively and management in 2011. So as an organization, citywide, LISNY is over 500 people strong. A majority of those staff work here in Brooklyn. I would say close to 200 people are in Brooklyn. And we're spread over, even under normal circumstances pre-COVID, a number of different offices across the borough. We've got an office downtown Brooklyn. We have an office out in East New York in Brownsville, and we have an office along Fulton Street in Bedford-Stuyvesant. We used to have more offices, frankly, and we've actually consolidated down since we consolidated as a program. So it's actually kind of interesting because even before COVID happened, we were facing a number of challenges around the issues relating to having staff located at various offices, and then also having our central office, which is located at 40 Worth in downtown Manhattan. You know, I mentioned that we are a large civil legal services provider because I want to highlight that, you know, many of the things that we have been able to do pre and post COVID, we have had the luxury of doing because we have a large budget. And I recognize that, you know, some of the things that we have developed are not necessarily accessible to folks with smaller budgets. But that having been said, I think one of the things that we've learned during COVID is there's a number of tools out there, internet-based tools, that can really help us as we have made this transition from a very concentrated in-person operation in the offices to a primarily remote operation with everybody working from home. So I'm going to build a little bit on what Ben was talking about, but just to get a little participation, and also because we are genuinely curious, of the participants in this session, could we maybe just by voice, because there's only a few of us, how many folks actually have intranet in your own offices already? It might be useful actually if you would tell us where you're each from, and then maybe tell us if you have built out an intranet in your own office. Maybe we'll start with Brennan, since you are the first person I see. Brennan Fraser.
Thank you. I work at a place called Mediation Matters. It's a dispute resolution community mediation center in Albany. We do not have a specific intranet. We do have a shared file server that all of us have access to remotely. We also have just our website with some password protected pages that we use for volunteers so they can access files and resources, but no like Google Sites, intranet kind of thing.
Thank you. Are you back in the office now, or are you still working remotely?
A few days a week in the office.
Got it. Donna, you're next on my screen.
All right. Similar to Brennan, I work for the Center for Dispute Settlement in Rochester. It's a community dispute resolution center. We do not have an intranet, although as Ben was talking, we have a very primitive Google Calendar that we have been sort of utilizing to talk amongst ourselves. We have somewhere in the vicinity of 100 volunteers who we communicate, again, very primitively, pretty much through email. So I'm looking to see what other ways we can communicate quickly with people, get information quickly.
Cool, thank you. Daniela is next on my screen.
Hi, yes, I work with the Urban Justice Center in New York City, and we do not have an intranet page, but we do have a shared file server, and we often utilize Teams and SharePoint pages.
David, Kim?
Hi, I work for the Juvenile Delinquency Unit for the Family Court Division and Court Counsel in New York City, and we do have an intranet.
Cool. And finally, not least, Runa?
Hi, I'm with the Bronx Defenders and the Civil Action Practice, and we are 100% remote. We're like 90-something% remote, and we do have an intranet. And too many tools. We have too many things. So I'm very interested, Ben, in like asking you questions about the personnel out system, but just to put that out there for now.
Cool. All right. So I'll make sure that we have time to have a back and forth and folks can ask questions. All right. So I'm going to take a quick minute to share my screen. Hold on one second. Yes. And I'm going to show you our intranet, which, again, as I think I mentioned, you know, or maybe I didn't, but we actually started building our intranet well before COVID. And this has to do with just the number of local offices we have, the size of our operation. And I was actually involved in the early stages of building out this intranet for no other reason except that I was interested. This was a project that really kind of started in Brooklyn, and then we made it citywide. So this is the landing page. This is the page that every employee at Legal Services, when they log in the morning, this is their homepage. And, you know, Runa, to your point, you'll see, everyone will see that, you know, there's a lot of stuff on here. I guess, that's, like I said, it probably befits an organization of this size to have a bunch of stuff, but I do think that it reduces the utility sometimes. I don't know that everybody is paying attention to all of the things that are happening. So we've got, you know, we've got the announcements, the central bar right there, and we've got on the left, you'll see these are all links, you know, they open up email exchanges with these various departments. So you got a staff directory, and then like Ben, you know, employee resources. So we've got the orientation, benefits comp, IT support, so on and so forth. Policies and protocols, where did I see that? Yeah, procedures right there. We also have our collective bargaining agreement on here. As everyone knows, we are a unionized program. Folks do use this fairly often, but it's primarily in the context of HR. We have here under major initiatives, our DEI work and our economic justice work. We have various sub-sites. So this was all built using SharePoint. So we have sub-sites, and of these sites, like I said, you know, Brooklyn took a lead in starting this, so we have the most robust borough page, and it has really everything that you need, including, so this is something right here, you see the access new process server request form. This is something we developed pre-COVID and has proven to be very useful. So we now can, we do both process server request requests and also secretarial work requests. Everything is done using this portal. And, you know, there's a number of benefits to this. One is we make sure the work gets done, it gets assigned and it gets done. And then there's a way of tracking it to, if there are problems with the completion of the work, we can figure out what went wrong. So Brooklyn's page is probably it's the most developed of all of the borough pages. But I'm gonna go back for 1 second and just take you into, because this has to do with our remote work in this moment. So right here, you see office visit request. This is something that we have had to implement in keeping with, you know, best practices, CDC guidelines. Folks do want to come into the office, and they do have to fill out forms, request permission 24 hours before they visit our office, so we can ensure that we are being as safe as possible. This is the other one that is really important to our staff, using office applications remotely. Now, I don't know that, I'm guessing this has been the experience of everybody else on this call, but, you know, Legal Services, we have a mix, I was saying to Ben, a mix of people at different technological capacities. We have folks who have been with the program, you know, 40 and 50 years before we even utilize computers. We've got folks who graduated from law school, you know, last year. And so this is probably one of our most landed on pages, is how to figure out how to access this wealth of technological resources so that folks can work from home until it's safe to come back to the office. Interestingly, we also just initiated, right in the middle of COVID, we didn't anticipate the pandemic, but we just set up multi-factor authentication because of security concerns, again, because of the size of our operation. So this gives folks, you know, a walkthrough of how to install and use all of your available technology. For our telephone systems, we use 8x8, which is a dedicated telephone program that allows us also to do conference calls, video conferencing, and all of those things. The other thing that has been really important during COVID is the ability to sign PDFs. So we do have Adobe Sign and Scan as something that's available to all of our staff. And we use Ignite for files, access to our file servers. if you remote into the program, into our remote desktop, you can access all of your files from the individual drives, but you can also use Ignite and do it over the internet. So that is a page that is really important to our staff. I'm now going to pivot and just take 2 minutes because I want to talk about specifically COVID-19 and the resources that we put together both for our staff and also for our clients. Now remember, here we're still in our intranet. So this is our COVID-19 staff resource page, which we built specifically in response to the pandemic. It's meant to be a repository of everything that people would need to know in this moment, including how to apply for, our social workers created a fund for our clients, so how to apply for money from that fund. And then, things that, as everybody knows, with this constant barrage of administrative orders and executive orders coming out of the court system and also the governor's office, trying to keep our staff updated on which courts are open, what kinds of motions do you need to make, and it's all very, very hyper technical and very specific to each practice area. So we do try to break it down by practice area, what's going on in a housing court, what's going on in family court. And this is also, it's a recognition that clients in our different practice areas have different imperatives when it comes to engaging with the court process, right? So we've got folks, and I know people on this call, seems like there's a number of folks who practice in the family arena, and it is important for clients in our family DV practice to be able to access the courts in a way that clients in our housing practice don't necessarily want the courts to reopen, because all it'll result in is their eviction. Whereas our family DV clients rely on the courts for safety and orders of protection and custody and so on and so forth. So this is meant to reflect that difference in our clients' lived experiences. So that's the COVID-19 resource page for our staff. This is, again, internal, it's inward facing, only accessible for our own employees. So we've got, software tips from IT about working from home. And then there is another page that is outward facing that I am going to show you. But first I have to stop that share, and I'm going to share our outward facing for clients. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this page. So this is on our outward facing website. This is Legal Services outward facing website. It's interesting, as Ben and I was showing this to Ben in preparation for this session, and he mentioned, his abhorrence of walls of text. And I very much feel like, there's work that can be done and will be done on this page. We do have hyperlinks within the page. It is broken down by practice. So, but I'm still not convinced it is user-friendly. If I were a client of my organization seeking specific information about particular things relating to my access to the courts, I'm not sure that I would have my questions answered from a visit to this page. But it's a work in progress. We didn't even have, a page like this, obviously, like everybody else, until I don't know, the last week of March, something like that. And it's not, it's hard to keep it updated, not least again, because as you know, things keep changing, especially in the housing practice in terms of which courts are open. So we try to keep it updated. And much like Ben's process, we've implemented a protocol for what gets onto this page. And the questions we ask, we don't have a flow chart because we're not as organized as Ben is. But the questions we ask is, what is this information? Why is it important? Is it up to date? Does it reflect like the current reality? And is it easy to understand? And we're not talking just about, has it been translated, but in whatever language it is in, is it geared towards a layperson, not an attorney? And is it helpful? And if the answers to those questions any of those questions is no, then it really will not make it onto our outward-facing website, because there's a lot of misinformation out there right now, and we want to make sure we're not contributing to the noise. So we have a little committee that draws on each borough, and we meet once a week on Monday to talk about what's on the website, what needs to go up, what is bubbling up, and how important is it for it to make it onto our website. And like I said, we do provide translations for all the materials that are on this website. So I am going to stop there because I do want to, like I said, leave time for some questions or discussion about anything, but I feel like we actually have packed a lot into the last 15, 20 minutes. So I am going to stop and throw it open.
And this discussion and the questions don't have to be centered around the internet. They can be around anything, anything that you're dealing with right now, or your organization, whether it's security or whether it's hardware, or, this is a place just for us to talk about whatever's on your plate.
I would love to just follow up on I framed the issue, but I think for us, and I'm sure other places, the challenge is that we have a lot of tools. We have ever-changing dynamic landscape that we're dealing with in all the different areas in which we're serving clients. And a diversity of people who have access and knowledge around using the various tools. I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not the most advanced. I'm not high tech, I'm not low tech, but I'm open to learning, And so one question is that sort of best expounding on best tips around how to both organize tools, but get people to a baseline place to understand what the tools are and how best to use them. And as my second question was specifically about your personnel out system, which I'm very, very interested in learning more about, because we just send a lot of emails all the time, including when people are out. And so it leads to no one reading their emails and getting the most important information.
Yeah, I think the second question is easier to answer because it's limited in scope. So the personnel out calendar. So we already have a system in place where if an employee is taking a personal day or is out all of a sudden, they're supposed to contact the supervisor just to let them know, I'm going to be out. And the supervisor is the one that sends the email, this person is going to be out. But that results in supervisors sending all these emails. And so it's 9 o'clock in the morning and you already have 15 or 20 emails just having, all the same thing. This person's out, this other person's out. So one of the ways that we simplified that is creating a Google Calendar that only supervisors can edit, can add appointments to, but everybody else in the organization can read. So the process, we kept the same. And I think that that's important. When you're figuring out new practices, is to keep the things that work and figure out what's not working about the process. So the process of people contacting their supervisors, that's fine, that works. What happens next is instead of the supervisor sending it out an email to everybody in CFR, they put the appointment in the calendar, and people know that the calendar is there. It's on the internet, so that if anybody's curious, they can go to the calendar and see. And so that's the part of the process that we fix. So instead of sending those emails out, people can go to the calendar, and then also because of Google Calendar has this function where you can hit agenda view and you could just see a list of the appointments. You see everybody who's out, and that's made it so much easier for everybody. So people receiving those emails don't receive all those emails anymore. So and supervisors, instead of sending those emails, they can just put everything into the calendars, and they can just wait and put all the appointments in the calendar instead of sending it out one at a time as they're receiving emails from other staff members. And I think that so, and this was a conversation, this is okay, what are the pain points, what's working, what's not working. And also I think that as technologists, part of our job is to translate things for people. And so we're constantly taking things and I think translating them into technology or computer speak. So people will have questions about, is there an easier way to do this? And we're just kind of translating things and presenting information in a different way that's more appetizing and more consumable and user friendly.
Runa, I have a question for you. So at Defenders, what is your email client? Do you use Outlook?
No, we use Gmail now.
Interesting. I'm going to take a quick second. I just want to share, and I think this might, I don't know if it'll be helpful, but just on this issue of personnel out, this is what my Outlook calendar looks like. Can folks see that? So this is how we utilize Outlook, right? And then, so we put all of our information in here. We don't do any emails really. Again, because if we sent an email about every person who was like not in, that would be all that we would spend all of our days doing, is reading emails about who was out. So we keep, this is the housing calendar, the housing unit calendar. So we keep everything in here, including who's out, who's on vacation, who's on UAC, and also people's individual cases, so that a supervisor, if someone is out, calls in sick suddenly, you know, we can just quickly go in and figure out, you know, where's the case, which part. So I'm wondering, is this in any way responsive to what you're asking about? And is that how you folks use Gmail calendars?
Yeah, we have, I think the challenge is like we have multiple calendars, like practice-wide calendars, personal calendars. We're also like accountable to like cross-practice, you know, so we're not like within one unit per se, because we're working in interdisciplinary and collaborative ways. So, and each practice has its own system and culture, like even within our intranet and how we built it out. So I think the question is really like, how do we share information to large groups of people? And so we've been relying on email because that's the most expedient and easiest way, but because there are so many emails, it just confuses everyone and is annoying, right? Just to get a bunch of emails of everyone who's out.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the personnel out calendar, we also have intake calendars, and you know, we're largely a family defense organization, but we just started taking on criminal cases too. So we have a criminal, so we have a calendar for the juvenile justice practice, and a separate one for the family defense intake, and then the calendars are broken down by borough. So instead of putting everything into one calendar, we have separate calendars for specific things, and the hyperlinks are posted onto one of the sections of the internet is just calendars. And then if you go to that page, you'll see the hyperlinks for each of the calendars. And when you click on the calendar, it'll just bring you to a view of the Google Calendar that you're looking for. So that's one way that we kind of you know, gotten around it. And you know, one thing that I'd like to see down the line when there are more IT people is, I think the practices are going to have their own specific internet pages. So there's going to have to be one that's specific to family defense and one that's specific to the juvenile justice practice. And honestly, probably they're going to have to be specific to borough too. So I don't know if it's a separate page or if it's just the family defense Manhattan and then family defense Queens. But right now we don't have the bandwidth to create those pages and to manage it. And that's the important part of it, is that, like, you know, do you have the resources to keep things up to date? And if you don't, then it's unfortunately, it's probably something that like we can't do until we do have the resources. So it's about like setting the priorities, about like what's the most important thing that we can do right now, and then having other priorities, you know, down the line that we would like to see, but it's not going to happen until we have those resources available.
That's helpful. And I'll step back because I'm sure other people have questions, but we have the opposite challenge, which is like we had to build out the intranet page for, like, I had to vision it and like we maintain it. So that leads to challenges are always around capacity, because you have like mostly managers and leaders who are like doing a lot of other things, also managing, trying to keep information up to date and vision it and make it accessible in ways that are meaningful and supportive and actually value added. So like we have kind of the opposite problem around that, because there is just like information changing every day. But I really appreciate the idea of like, maybe it's a simple thing of a way to connect the Google Calendar to the internet, or like view it in a way that it sounds like it's simpler then maybe I'm thinking about it. So I'm excited about implementing something that's easy and achievable that could make people's lives better. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
I have maybe two questions regarding Google Sites and G Suite. We do not use G Suite, so I was wondering if you know of any limitations on Google Sites if you don't have the G Suite for nonprofits or whatever it is that you use that could, such as upload limits or things like that, that might make it not as effective, as well as any security issues since we don't have a domain through G Suites that could filter people out on who has access, other ways to make sure that only the people that we want having access to that intranet would be able to access it.
Yeah, so because we are a Google Apps organization, this was a lot easier for us, just because we could connect the intranet is Google Sites is something that we already had access to, and that was already built into the security. So only people that have .cfrny addresses, .org addresses can see what's on the internet. So I do think that is an issue for people that aren't Google Apps organizations, is how to limit access. And quite frankly, so when I started building out the site in April, in about March or April, I was using Google, the classic sites, and that's being phased out at the end of next year, which is frustrating because one of the things that the classic Google Sites has that the new sites don't have, and I already migrated the site, is that classic sites has page permissions. So you can actually set permissions on specific pages for only certain people. So I was envisioning having a page that just supervisors had access to so they can post their own announcements and talk amongst each other. With the new Google Sites, that's not an option anymore. Everybody sees everything. So that's kind of frustrating. We can't have that. But right now it's not an issue, just because even if we had something for the supervisors, it's not something that I can maintain by myself. So we don't have the bandwidth and the need for that, quite frankly, at this point. But it is something that down the line, we're going to have to figure out, and that might mean migrating our internet out of Google Sites and using another platform. And right now, we're not posting confidential information to our internet. We're not posting any client information or even any employee information, just because, we don't want to delve into those security concerns at this moment. So the way we get around, sometimes the easiest way to get around it is just to not put the confidential information out there where it is accessible.
This is fascinating for me. I was wondering, when you have new employees, is there a training for IT also so that people can learn what they need to on the calendars, or you just hiring young people who already have a lot of this information already? I'm curious, I'm interested in what kind of training you sort of build into your system, or is it sort of a haphazard thing?
I could speak to that because we just hired a new class that's starting this month in October. So it's a there's different steps to it. So whenever we bring somebody on board, once they have their laptop and their credentials, I send out an IT orientation email, and that's just the basics. This is who we are. This is your email account. Please change the password because I don't want it to be the default password, and and set up two-factor authentication so you don't get locked out of your email account eventually. So that's the basic stuff. And then part of the intranet, I did build a page for new hires. So it does, and it was something that it was information that already existed. A lot of our intranet is information that already existed in other places. So it was just pulling the information into one place. And that's more of the training information. So how to use certain Google apps, how to set them up on their phone. And it's probably too much information for people who already are familiar with the technology. But for people that aren't as comfortable, it's there and it's accessible so that they can have. And a lot of it is not rebuilding the wheel. So if there's already a Google tutorial or a video out there or a YouTube video that is that will train people, I'll link to that instead of like making my own video and like, you know, starting all over again. And then we even have on our new hire page like a list of like abbreviation and acronyms that only we as an organization use just to help people along. So so it's definitely become more systemized as we've gone along. It used to be haphazard, and we're trying to pull these things together.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you.
And I'll just say for legal services, again, I find this interaction with Ben so educational, because that's admirable. We don't do anything of the sort. It is kind of catch as catch can. Definitely part of it is that we are hiring folks who are much more tech savvy than the folks that we have in-house. So we don't have an IT orientation. I think that what we do is a combination of two things. One, we send them to the intranet, and specifically to the IT support page, and ask them to read it. We have an office manual that actually has a lot of this information in there, but that's a Brooklyn specific thing. Again, it's a borough thing. It also tells you things like, you know, what is the code to the front door, and, you know, how many days do I get off in a year? So it's got a lot of stuff in it. And this goes back to what Runa was saying, you know, there's so much information. How do we make sure that we're providing it to our staff in a way that is small bites and allows them to digest it, especially when they first start, everything is so overwhelming. So we don't, yeah, you know, I like the idea of like common acronyms that we use, because it can feel like you've landed in a foreign land when you start working in one of our organizations. So I'm definitely going to file that away as a thought. But I think that's the way we do it, is more catch as catch can. Go to the website, take a look, read the office manual. If you still have questions, you know, talk to our director of admin and they will walk you through it. So.
Great, thanks.
So we're exactly at the 2:15 mark, which I believe represents the end of this session. Is that right, Ben, Peter?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we hope it was useful, and you know, we are, I think, available if folks want to email us, or I'm always happy to talk to folks. It seems like Ben is also happy to talk to folks.
Yeah, definitely. Our email addresses are part of SCED, I think, in the bio. So like, if you have anything, just feel free to reach out. And I'm willing to share certain slides and certain things, and you know, answer whatever questions you have.
Thank you. I think I will be following up with both of you. So thanks.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, Peter.
Yes, no problem. Thank you.